To His Most Noble Beneficence, the King of Chu, and the members of His Excellency's court, I wish to begin by first expressing my gratitude and humility that His Grace and His court, in their search for wisdom throughout this land, have allowed me, Xie Wei, to speak, so that they might find in the wisdom of the words of Master Lao Tzu and his writings, and through them, the path to prosperity for the kingdom, its people, and the king itself. Much has been made of the concept of Wu Wei, that is to say, actively doing nothing. Unfortunately, many who speak of it do not understand it, and befuddle the minds of those wishing to know Wu Wei, and those who know Wu Wei and its virtue stay silent. This is not because the wise who understand Wu Wei and choose to hoard this knowledge. It's the opposite. It is because those who understand the Wu Wei, which is truly the way of virtue, do not seek fame or glory. They follow the way because it leads to peace and prosperity. The way, despite its name, does not mean doing nothing. It means to do nothing unnecessarily, and also to do nothing for oneself or one's ego. As the Master says in the 30th chapter of Tao Te Ching, the highest kind of man has innate goodness, and that is what he rules with. The man of virtue rules by Wu Wei, doing nothing for himself or of himself. The master who rules with compassion acts through it, and no one even realizes what he has done. As we see from the Master's words, by acting without ego and by acting naturally in accordance with the Tao, is not seen to be acting because he is acting in accordance with the way of nature, which can be none other than the way of virtue. So when we say the way of virtue, we also mean the way of nature, which is also Wu Wei. But what are the practical applications of this? Firstly, we know that in many traditions across our nation, they are full of laws. Laws are not bad, and exist to keep those who do not or cannot know the way from hindering those people of virtue. However, an excess of law binds the people, and they chafe under its yoke. Good men are made criminals because they are ignorant of the ever-changing rules made to gratify an ego. This is not in accordance with nature or the way. As the Master says in the 57th chapter, the more rules you have, the more unhappy people are. The more weapons there are, the worse things happen. And the more we want luxuries, the more we abandon simplicity. And the more laws you pass, the more people will break them. So the sage says, I do nothing, and the people come together. By leaving them alone, I let them be on the path. By not using my power, they become rich in themselves. And if I want nothing, they return to the essence of their being. So we see that, by acting in accordance with the way, a kingdom shall become enriched by its people. What does this mean in practical terms? By leaving the people to their own ends as much as possible, they prosper. Their prosperity becomes that of the kingdom, which in turn becomes your prosperity, Your Highness. But, being wise in the way, you will have no need of it for yourself, and can return this to the people. Thus does the circle continue. This does not mean that public works, such as roads and dams, are to be neglected, of course. This returns to the idea of doing nothing unnecessarily. If the cost of a dam is 10 pounds of gold, and the cost of rebuilding villages destroyed in a flood is 100 pounds of gold, to say nothing of the lives lost, then of course one should build a dam. As the Master says in chapter 64, when everything is peaceful, do not forget danger. And when things are safe, don't lose your edge. A brittle thing can break easily, and a small thing fragment. So act before it happens. Order things before chaos breaks out. As a final matter, which sadly occupies the minds of rulers and counselors of this age, the Master is quite clear on war. It is a last resort, always. When we war, we should be on the defensive, never being aggressive ourselves. And in victory, we should grieve both for the lost and that the way has been ignored. To close, I will read chapter 33. The Emperor's advisors will never recommend violence if they know what the way is. If you use the strategy of warfare, it can only result in vengeance. After troops have trampled by, only weeds and nettles grow in the ground. There can be no harvest and everyone is starving. If you need to take action, do only what is necessary. Never abuse your strength. Those who use force soon end up without it. This is not the way. To His Majesty and the court, I thank you.